Hello, and thank you for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time to work on developing your English skills and personal growth. A few years ago, I met a student who was almost ready to give up on English. He had studied for a long time, yet he still felt that speaking was impossible. Every time he opened a textbook, he saw endless lists of vocabulary. Some lists said 5,000 words were necessary. Other lists said 8,000. Sometimes people even mentioned 10,000 words. After seeing numbers like that again and again, he reached a quiet conclusion. English was simply too big. He believed he would never catch up. So he tried the only method he thought could work. Every day he forced himself to memorize many new words. He filled several notebooks with vocabulary. He read the same lists many times. He worked harder than most people around him. But something strange always happened when he tried to speak. During real conversations, the words he studied seemed to disappear. He recognized them when reading, yet when he opened his mouth, nothing came out. At that point, he became convinced of one thing: his vocabulary was still not large enough. However, the real reason for his difficulty was something completely different. When I listened to that student, I began thinking about how people actually speak English. Then I remembered a small detail that many learners never pay attention to. In daily conversations, people usually repeat the same simple words again and again. If you spend time listening to native speakers talking naturally, you will see this clearly. The most common words are not advanced or complicated. They are very familiar ones. Words like go, make, take, get, come, do, think, want, see, and know. Most learners meet these words at the very beginning of their studies. Yet these simple verbs appear everywhere in daily speech. You can hear them inside the house. You can hear them while people are walking outside. You can hear them during work conversations. You can even hear them when friends talk casually together. This observation reveals something important. Human communication does not depend on an enormous vocabulary. In fact, a relatively small group of words appears most of the time. Many language researchers often mention a number close to 300 core words. These words form the basic structure of everyday communication. When learners understand them well, they can already express many simple ideas. At first, this idea may sound difficult to believe, but if you observe real conversations carefully, it becomes much easier to understand. People do not normally choose complicated vocabulary. They prefer words that feel natural and familiar. They create short sentences, and they repeat similar expressions every day. After some time, that student asked an important question. If vocabulary is not the biggest problem, then what really matters? The answer is simpler than most learners expect. Communication mainly depends on the ability to build sentences. Knowing many words is useful, but it is not enough. Words only become powerful when they are connected together. A single word on its own does very little. But once it enters a sentence, it begins to carry meaning. Imagine a learner who only knows 4 basic words: go, work, home, and today. Even with these 4 words, a clear sentence can already appear. I go to work today. If another familiar word is added, the sentence becomes more detailed. I go to work early today. Then the sentence can change slightly. I go home early today. Only a small change creates a new message. This is how language truly functions. It does not depend on endless vocabulary. Instead, it depends on combining known words in different ways. The same word can appear in many different sentences, and one sentence can change by replacing a small detail. Because of this system, a small vocabulary can still create many ideas. The real goal is not collecting new words every day. The real goal is understanding known words much more deeply and learning to use them in different contexts. Later, I asked that student how he normally studied vocabulary. His answer sounded very familiar. He usually wrote an English word on one side of a notebook. Then he wrote the translation in his native language next to it. After that, he tried to memorize it. This method works for a short time, but after several days, many words start to disappear. Even when the meaning stays in memory, another problem appears. The learner still cannot use the word naturally in a sentence. This happens because the word was learned in isolation. It was never connected to a real situation. A more effective approach is learning vocabulary inside phrases. For example, instead of memorizing the word make alone, learners might learn expressions. They might learn make a decision. They might learn make a plan. They might learn make a mistake. In this situation, the brain does not remember a word by itself. It remembers a moment when the phrase is used. When speaking later, that phrase can return to memory much faster. Interestingly, this is exactly how native speakers use language. They rarely think about single words. They think in phrases. They think in sentences. They think in patterns they have heard many times before. As the student continued learning, we focused on one specific group of basic verbs. These verbs include get, take, make, give, go, come, put, and bring. At first, they look extremely ordinary, but their flexibility makes them very powerful. They can connect with many nouns. They can appear in many different situations. Take the verb get as an example. You might hear people say get home. You might hear get ready. You might hear get a job. You might hear get better. You might hear get a chance. The verb itself never changes. However, the meaning shifts depending on the surrounding words. Daily conversations often rely on these combinations. People rarely search for complicated vocabulary. They usually choose a familiar verb, then they add a few simple words. That combination is enough to communicate the idea. Because of this, learners benefit greatly from studying these verbs carefully. They should not only memorize the meaning, they should also explore how the verbs combine with other words. The more combinations they understand, the more ideas they can express. Even after learning these ideas, that student still faced another challenge. He knew many explanations, but he still needed practice. Language knowledge alone does not create fluency. Language is a skill, and skills improve through use. Learners must speak regularly. They must form sentences. They must describe their daily experiences. They can practice speaking by themselves. They can speak with friends. They can talk with anyone who is willing to listen. The main objective is not perfect grammar. The main objective is consistent practice. Every time a learner uses a word in a real sentence, memory becomes stronger. Every time an idea is spoken aloud, the brain reacts a little faster. After many repetitions, speaking begins to feel natural. The learner no longer needs to translate every thought. Long pauses disappear. Words begin to come more easily. Communication becomes smoother. During one conversation practice, the student suddenly stopped speaking. He couldn't remember an important word. For many learners, this moment feels very uncomfortable. They want to continue speaking, but the exact vocabulary is missing. Often, they choose to stay silent. Sometimes they return to their native language. However, communication does not require perfect vocabulary. It only requires a clear message. If someone forgets the word refrigerator, they can describe it. They can say it is the big box that keeps food cold. If they cannot remember the word calculator, they can explain it differently. They can call it the small machine used for counting numbers. This technique is called paraphrasing. It allows speakers to continue the conversation. It prevents communication from stopping. Most importantly, it helps learners feel more confident. Perfect vocabulary is not necessary. Clear meaning is what truly matters. After some months of changing his approach, that student began noticing progress. His vocabulary did not suddenly become huge, but his ability to speak improved. He realized something important about language learning. Fluent communication does not require an endless list of words. It requires a strong foundation. That foundation begins with a small group of core vocabulary. Learners must understand these words deeply. They must know how to connect them into sentences, and they must practice using them regularly. When this happens, familiar words become powerful tools. They allow people to talk about work. They help express emotions. They help describe events from daily life. With time, vocabulary grows naturally, not through forced memorization, but through constant use. Everything begins with a few hundred simple words. Yet, when those words are used well, they open the door to a much larger world of communication. If you find this video interesting and helpful, please give me a like and subscribe.